What's up guys, Lvladen here, and today I'm coming at you with a video on the live realms. I want to talk a little bit about the state of RET, the positives, the negatives, and some changes that I would hope to see in the spec going into future patches. Alright, so let's start with the positives. So right now, after the 11.0.5 rework, RET has definitely seen an improvement in its tankiness and its teammate utility. Lay on Hands has definitely become a strong, formidable cooldown. Once again, it now cuts through the healing reduction effects such as Mortal Strike and Dampening. You can now bubble on Forbearance, which allows you to play with Holy Paladins, who are one of the strongest, if not the strongest healer at the moment. And in general, it's felt pretty tanky with an increase to the healing received during Divine Protection. We also have a bunch of little self-sustain heals, such as Holy Ritual and Seal the Crusader, which has upped our teammate and self-healing. A couple neutral comments right here. So not necessarily positives or negatives, just a couple observations. We have a couple viable 3v3 comps, but they're pretty reliant on other specialization strengths right now. I don't think RET is it's not really a meta spec at the moment, at least in 3v3 arena. I think BM Hunter plus RET plus probably an H-Pal or Disc Priest is a decent comp. And also RET Warrior, either Mistweaver or Holy Paladin, is another decent comp. You can also play it with the Preservation Evoker right now. So only a couple comps. I haven't really played too much RET Demo, but I could see that being okay as well. It's also not super oversaturated in the 3v3 bracket, so you're not going to run into a ton of RET Paladins. Just maybe one or two here or there in most of the brackets. It's also pretty decent in both Solo Shuffle and BG Blitz. And that's more the fact that those are kind of teammate games, and also going back to the teammate utility in Solo Shuffle, it's very good. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about the negatives, and by a little bit I mean I might go over that a little bit more than the positives in the neutral comments here. But that's not necessarily because RET is a bad class. That's just because it's my main, and I want to overanalyze things and really talk about the nitty gritty on how this spec can be improved. So let's start with the reworked Paladin talent trees here. So with the rework, there were a lot of talents that just didn't end up panning out for RET, and that's fine. I mean, there's always going to be a couple dead talents here or there, but some of the talents that I saw that I kind of wish were a little bit better, but there's just not enough room to grab them, or they're kind of on a choice node with another spell, include Adjust Reward, Divine Spurs, Steed of Glory, probably my number one unfortunate talent here is Steed of Glory. The fact that you have to choose Steed of Glory or Freedom really sucks. Turn Evil and its additional talents, but that's more of along the lines of I haven't run into too many comps where Turn Evil is super necessary. And Selfless Healer. Selfless Healer just could probably be buffed in the fact that, Flash of Light really does not do that much healing, so you can't really play Selfless Healer as a RET Paladin. So yeah, those talents in the Paladin side of the talent tree could probably use a rework or replacement, or just to put them on someone's radar. Now I want to talk a little bit about the oversaturation of PvP specific nerfs. Now, as someone coming into WoW, you have a lot of barriers to overcome, and that's kind of, I'm going to save that comments for a different video. But if you're specifically coming into a RET Paladin PvP outlook on the game, you have a ton. Actually, the majority of your abilities have some sort of PvP modifier on them. This includes Judgment of Light, which is just a random Paladin talent, Avenging Wrath, Crusade, Final Reckoning, Inquisitor's Ire, Empyrean Legacy, the hero talents Morning Star, the hero talent Blessing of Anshi, Hammer of Light itself. Did I already say Hammer of Light? I don't think I did. The Paladin talent Divine Purpose, Stoicism, which in my opinion is actually warranted. That is the stun reduction talent. You have Illumine, which I don't understand why there is a PvP nerf on Illumine, because we already have a 30% slow. So if you guys are unaware, Illumine is the Dawn Light slow from the hero talent tree, but for some reason it's nerfed from 50% slow, which pretty much almost every specialization has a 50% slow, to I believe a 30% slow. And it does not stack with our Judgment slow, so it really doesn't do anything. Divine Guidance is nerfed in PvP combat. I don't understand why Divine Guidance is nerfed in PvP combat, because Eternal Flame is already it already has a PvP nerf. Divine Arbiter has a PvP nerf. Divine Protection has a PvP nerf, so it's 10% in PvP combat rather than 20%. Execution has a PvP nerf, even though it's already very weak. Eternal Flame, oh, I just mentioned that, sorry. I actually put a question mark next to Eternal Flame because I don't understand how Eternal Flame's PvP modifier works, because it was buffed for RET, but it was previously nerfed, and there's just no updated patch notes on it, on the current mod on Eternal Flame. But I do know Healing Hands is nerfed in PvP, so in some way, one way or another, Eternal Flame is nerfed. Lay on Hands is nerfed, but granted, it cuts through healing resistances now, or healing mods, so I do find a 75% Lay on Hands is fine. Light Celerity is nerfed in PvP combat. Kind of a bummer because Flash of Light is already really weak. Truce Wake and Wake of Ashes are both nerfed in PvP, to my understanding. Those are other spells that I'm gonna leave a little question mark next to. I'm not actually positive, but the old mods should still be on there, and if that's the case, then both of those spells are in fact nerfed in PvP still. So that's a lot, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but that means that a lot of our spells that we think would maybe pair well together, or maybe work, or maybe cause a little bit bigger burst, they really don't. And now I understand that we can't have a bunch of big one-shot mechanics, but to have the majority of our modifier spells nerfed in some way does not feel great. And the two big standout things that currently, you push them and they don't feel great are, number one, Final Verdict, and number two, Avenging Wrath or Crusade. So active Avenging Wrath and active Crusade, one, they're both nerfed in PvP combat, and two, they're both weaker than Radiant Glory. So the passive options are showing or outshining the active options, which is not necessarily something that I would do, but I understand the design philosophy of trying to make WoW a more accessible, easier game. I actually agree with that. But I do think that in one way or another, it's time to roll back the nerfs on Avenging Wrath and Crusade. They just don't feel like super impactful abilities anymore. So a couple of ways that I want to see RET improved, and these don't necessarily have to be buffs. They can be shifting of damage breakdowns, or shifting the damage breakdown into your active abilities. So one thing I want to see is shifting damage from Empyrean Hammers back into Final Verdict. So in PvP, Empyrean Hammers are borderline useless. If you actually go into details and look at the targets that your Empyrean Hammer strikes, if you're fighting classes with pets or minions or miners or anything, the majority of your Empyrean Hammer damage will actually be on targets that are not players. That means that they have completely absorbed and taken the Empyrean Hammer effect. Now, Empyrean Hammers do get you closer to your Light's guidance, your Hammer of Light reset, but at the end of the day, it still is, in PvE at least, it is factored into RET's overall damage. So because of the pet problem in PvP, Empyrean Hammers are almost useless. So I really hope that there's a way for Blizzard to either shift some of the damage from Empyrean Hammer back into Final Verdict, which shouldn't necessarily affect PvE because, it'd also be a PvE buff, or find a way to make Empyrean Hammer less RNG in PvP, or just make it strike the target that RET already has active. Empyrean Hammers are quite often, if you're doing the Templar rotation correctly, they're going to be your number one on your breakdown. But in your overall damage on players, they're going to be something like 6 or 7. They're going to be way down there in your overall. And this is solo shuffle after solo shuffle, BG Blitz after BG Blitz. Empyrean Hammers just is not adding up. And the same can be said for Herald of the Sun as well. I'd like to see Blizzard shift some damage away from Sun's avatar and put it back into Final Verdict. Sun's avatar is just another damage over time effect that we already have from Dawn Light. It's just useless pad damage. So if we can find a way to make Final Verdict hit harder, be more effective, while just shifting damage away and not asking for straight up buffs, I think that would probably be a more likely scenario, because I don't want RET to go back to its one-shotty, insanely overpopulated, appeal that had in Dragonflight, but I also want the abilities to feel like they actually do something. I also do think that there's probably room to buff RET's damage overall. I'm quite frequently the lowest damage dealer in solo shuffle, and maybe that's because of my playstyle, but it's just, I feel like the way that it's panning out, there's probably a room for like a 5% overall buff, but instead of a 5% overall buff in PvP, I'd rather see them launch up Avenging Wrath, Crusade, and Final Verdict, and in some way, if they really do need to shift damage, I'd like the damage shifted away from Sun's Avatar and Imperial Hammer. And lastly here, maybe this is just me, but I find Templar Strikes so fun. I still play Templar Strikes sometimes, but after the bug fixes to Templar Slash, where the damage over time effect is no longer double dipping into the Burning Crusade modifier, it fell off. It fell way off. And I want to find a way that makes Templar Strikes competitive with Crusading Strikes, and I think the only way that that really happens is if they further buff the ability. Like, it does hit okay, it hits decent. It's just people are of the mindset that if I can have a passive option, why would I have an active option? But for those of us that like the active option, it just would be nice if it's still competitive with Crusading Strikes, which currently I don't feel like it is. After the changes to the damage over time effect, it just does not feel like it hits hard enough anymore, or is kind of worth pressing. All right, so I know my negatives were a little bit more in depth than the positives, but overall I feel like RET is a solid pick. It's not super overpowered, but it's definitely competitive. It's just maybe not as fun rotationally as I feel like it should be. You're not gonna deal a lot of damage with your Holy Power spenders outside of Hammer of Light. Hammer of Light's your one big nuke right now. Final Verdict, just, you can stack up a ton of modifiers. You can stack up Blessing of Dawn. You can stack up Final Reckoning. You can stack up Crusade. You can stack up, what have I missed here? Greater Judgment. And all these modifiers, they're going to make it hit about 660k. And that's with going like full mastery. It does not hit very hard anymore. All right, so you guys have listened to me ramble long enough. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And I hope RET can get a little bit of a love in the future. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.